The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Starfleet has cataloged thousands of species, charted nebulae that span light years, and encountered phenomena that challenge the very fabric of reality. But what happens when something defies every sensor, every theory, every rational explanation? What happens when the impossible bleeds into the cold vacuum of space, bringing with it the stench of brimstone and death? The USS Voyager was 70,000 light-years from home, a solitary Federation starship adrift in the Delta Quadrant's uncharted expanse. For 3 years, Captain Catherine Janeway and her crew had navigated hostile space, faced dangers that would have destroyed lesser ships, and clung to the hope that one day they would see Earth again. They had adapted to isolation, learned to survive without Starfleet support, and forged themselves into something stronger than regulations and protocol alone could create. On stardate 50,614.2, they were conducting a routine survey of an N-class planet in an unremarkable star system. The bridge was quiet, almost peaceful. Commander Chakotay reviewed geological data at his station. Lieutenant Tom Paris guided Voyager through a standard orbit. Ensign Harry Kim monitored communications with their away team on the surface. Even B'Elanna Torres, perpetually restless in engineering, had reported no anomalies. Then the sensor screamed. "Captain, I'm reading a subspace rupture forming directly ahead." Harry Kim's voice cracked with urgency. "It's unlike anything in our database. Energy signature is off the scale." Janeway's coffee cup hit the armrest holder as she stood. On screen. The view screen shimmered, replacing the planet's blue-green curvature with something that shouldn't exist. Space itself was tearing open like a wound, edges flickering with colors that had no names in human language. Not the clean blue-white of a typical wormhole, or the organized geometry of a spatial rift. This was chaos, a gash in reality that pulsed with red and black energies, shot through with what looked disturbingly like veins of living tissue. "Shields up! Evasive maneuvers!" Janeway commanded. Paris's hands flew across the con. "It's expanding too fast. We can't clear it in time." The rupture spread like a cancer, tendrils of impossible energy reaching for Voyager's hull. The ship shuddered violently as the anomaly's gravitational distortion seized them. Consoles sparked. The lights flickered. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the rupture vomited something into normal space. "Captain, something just materialized on Deck 6, Section 12. Tuvok reported from Tactical, his Vulcan composure barely masking his confusion. "Life signs are contradictory." "Contradictory how?" "Sensors register biological activity, but also indicate the subject is deceased. It is reading simultaneously as organic matter and an unknown form of energy I cannot classify." He looked up from his console. "Captain, according to our instruments, whatever just appeared on this ship is both alive and dead." Janeway felt the familiar tension coil in her chest, the same feeling she got before every first contact that went wrong. "Security teams to Deck 6. Tuvok, you're with me." "Chakotay, you have the bridge." She tapped her comm badge. Janeway to sickbay. "Doctor, prepare for a possible medical emergency. We have an unknown entity aboard." The doctor's aristocratic voice crackled back. "Unknown entity? Captain, could you be more specific?" "I'll let you know when I figure that out myself." The turbolift ride to Deck 6 felt longer than usual. Tuvok stood beside her, phaser drawn, his dark eyes focused on the doors. Janeway had seen him face Kazon raiders, spatial anomalies, and temporal paradoxes without flinching. The slight tension in his shoulders told her this was different. The doors opened to reveal Deck 6's main corridor bathed in emergency lighting. 2 security officers stood at the intersection ahead, phasers trained on something around the corner. Ensign Murphy, a young woman barely out of the academy, looked back at Janeway with barely concealed fear. "Captain, it's not responding to hails." "Just standing there." Janeway stepped forward slowly, Tuvok at her shoulder. "I'm Captain Catherine Janeway of the Federation starship Voyager." You've appeared on our vessel under unusual circumstances. We mean you no harm, but I need you to identify yourself. Silence. Then, a sound that made her skin crawl, chains sliding against metal, heavy and deliberate. She rounded the corner and stopped. He stood in the center of the corridor, a figure that belonged in nightmares, not aboard a Starfleet vessel. Tall, over 6 feet. Wrapped in what looked like a tattered crimson cape that moved independently of any air current, as if it were alive and breathing. The suit covering his body wasn't fabric or armor but something organic, black and green, with textures that shifted like liquid shadow. Chains wrapped around his torso and arms, their links forged from a metal that gleamed dully in the emergency lights. But it was the mask that froze her in place. A death's head rendered in white and black, eyeless sockets that somehow still saw, a face designed to terrify. And in those empty sockets, green energy burned with an intensity that made her ship's warp core look dim by comparison. Fascinating, Tuvok murmured. Captain, I am detecting massive energy fluctuations within his body. The cape appears to be a separate life form, possibly symbiotic. The figure's head turned toward them with mechanical precision. When he spoke, his voice was a rasp that seemed to echo from somewhere deep and cold. Where am I? Not a threat. A question. Janeway lowered her hand slightly, signaling security to hold fire. You're aboard the USS Voyager, a Federation starship. We're in the Delta Quadrant, approximately 70,000 light-years from Earth. A subspace rupture deposited you here. What's the last thing you remember? The figure looked down at his hands, gauntlet clawed, as if seeing them for the first time. The chains rattled softly. I was in hell. Fighting. Malbolgia's forces were... He stopped, head snapping up. This isn't hell. No, Janeway said carefully. This isn't hell. This is a starship. We use science and technology to explore space. Science. The word came out like a curse. There's no science where I come from. Just power. Just pain. The green glow in his eyes intensified. I can feel it. This place, it's wrong. The energy here is all wrong. Energy? Janeway glanced at Tuvok. Indeed. I hypothesize that whatever power source he utilizes is incompatible with our universe's physical laws. Tuvok's tricorder chirped frantically. Captain, his energy signature is destabilizing. Whatever is keeping him functional is depleting rapidly. The figure staggered slightly, one hand bracing against the bulkhead. The metal groaned under his grip, buckling inward. The symbiote, it's starving. Needs to feed. Janeway made a decision. Beam him directly to sickbay. Now. Captain, that may be inadvisable. Do it, Tuvok. The transporter beam seized the figure mid-collapse, his form shimmering into golden particles and vanishing. Janeway tapped her comm badge. Doctor, incoming emergency transport. Be ready for anything. She turned to her security team. Seal off this deck. I want a full analysis of that rupture's residual energy. And someone find out what the hell just happened to our ship. As she headed back to the bridge, Janeway couldn't shake the image of those burning green eyes. Dead but alive. Impossible but real. And somehow, she knew this was only the beginning. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. In sickbay, the doctor was already scanning his new patient with mounting disbelief. The readings made no sense. Necrotic tissue. Active cellular regeneration. Energy patterns that resembled nothing in his medical database. And underneath it all, something else, something that felt aware, watching, waiting. Simmons lay on the biobed, the symbiote writhing across his body like a living shadow, and for the first time since his resurrection, he wondered if perhaps Hell had found a new way to torment him. Far away, deeper in the Delta Quadrant, a Borg cube detected an unusual energy signature. New. Unknown. Worthy of investigation. The collective stirred. And the Queen opened her eyes. The doctor materialized in sickbay just as the transport beam deposited Spawn onto the primary biobed. The holographic physician had treated Vidian phage victims, repaired organs ravaged by spatial anomalies, and once performed surgery on himself. None of it prepared him for this. Merciful heavens! He breathed, medical tricorder already in hand. The symbiote reacted to the scan, cape lashing out like a striking serpent. The doctor jumped back as the biobe's support struts crumpled under suddenly increased weight. Spawn's body convulsed, green energy crackling across his armor in erratic patterns. Computer, activate emergency medical force field around biobed 3. A shimmering barrier snapped into place just as chains erupted from Spawn's body, slamming against the containment field with enough force to make the entire room shudder. The doctor watched, fascinated and horrified, as the figure on the bed fought something invisible, something internal. It's the symbiote. Spawn rasped, his voice distorted with pain. Trying to adapt. Trying to find something to feed on. Your universe, it's starving us. The doctor adjusted his tricorder settings, scanning deeper. What he saw defied medical classification. Spawn's cellular structure was simultaneously necrotic and regenerating. His cardiovascular system showed no heartbeat, yet blood, or something like it, circulated through his veins. The energy readings were off every known scale, fluctuating wildly between massive output and near-zero levels. Your physiology is impossible, the doctor said, more to himself than his patient. You're clinically dead, yet exhibiting signs of extreme metabolic activity. The energy source animating you appears to be extradimensional in nature, but it's degrading rapidly in our space-time continuum. English, Doc. Spawn's grip on the biobed left finger-shaped dents in the tritanium frame. You're dying. Again. Whatever is keeping you alive requires a specific type of energy that doesn't exist in our universe. The doctor moved closer to the force field, professional curiosity overriding caution. This symbiote, it's sentient, isn't it? Spawn's masked face turned toward him. Through the force field's shimmer, those green eyes blazed with something beyond human emotion. Yeah. It's alive. We're bonded. Can't separate us without killing what's left of me. Fascinating. A true symbiotic relationship, but not like the Trill. This is complete integration at the cellular level. The doctor's fingers flew across his medical console. I'm detecting trace amounts of antimatter decay in your immediate vicinity. The symbiote is attempting to metabolize our ship's power systems. As if in response to being identified, the cape extended pseudopods toward the medical equipment. Energy conduits in the walls flickered. The lights dimmed momentarily. It's hungry, Spawn said. His voice carried an edge of warning. And when it gets hungry enough, it stops listening to me. The sickbay doors hissed open. Captain Janeway entered flanked by Tuvok and Chakotay, all three keeping a respectful distance from the force field. Janeway's eyes took in the scene, the damaged biobed, the crackling energy, the chains still wrapped around Spawn's torso like sleeping serpents. Doctor, report. Captain, our guest is experiencing severe physiological distress due to dimensional incompatibility. His life force, for lack of a better term, is tied to energy signatures that don't naturally occur in our universe. Without an alternative power source, he'll destabilize completely within 12 hours. How is he even conscious? Chakotay asked, his tactical mind already assessing threat levels. I have absolutely no idea. By every medical standard I know, he should have ceased functioning the moment he arrived. The doctor gestured to his readings. His neural patterns show activity, but there's no conventional brain function. It's as if his consciousness exists independently of his physical form. Because it does. Spawn sat up slowly, chains clinking. The force field hummed with strain as he moved. I died. Years ago. Got sent to hell. Made a deal to come back. The symbiote is the price. It keeps me alive. Gives me power. But it's not from your world, your universe, whatever this place is. Janeway stepped closer to the containment field, meeting those burning eyes without flinching. What's your name? Al Simmons. Some call me Spawn. I'm Captain Catherine Janeway. Mr. Simmons, I need to understand what we're dealing with. Are you a threat to my ship or crew? Spawn was silent for a long moment. The symbiote rippled across his body, patterns shifting like oil on water. That depends on whether you try to kill me. The symbiote doesn't distinguish between threats and food sources when it's desperate. Then we need to find a way to stabilize you. Janeway turned to Tuvok. Analysis? The Vulcan consulted his tricorder. The energy signature emanating from Mr. Simmons resembles exotic particles we encountered near the necrotic expanse, specifically, negative space wedges and inverse warp fields. It is possible that the symbiote could adapt to draw power from similar sources. B'Elanna could modify a power coupling to generate an inverse field, Chakotay suggested. Create a controlled environment where his physiology might stabilize. Do it. Janeway's command was crisp. But we do this in a controlled setting. Cargo Bay 2. Full security protocols. Captain. Spawn's voice stopped her at the door. Why are you helping me? You don't know what I am. What I've done. Janeway turned back, and for a moment, the weight of 3 years stranded in the Delta Quadrant showed in her eyes. Because out here, 70,000 light-years from home, we're all strangers trying to survive. And because Starfleet doesn't abandon people in need, no matter how unusual the circumstances. Starfleet. Spawn tested the word. You're military? We're explorers first. But yes, we have protocols, regulations, command structures. She paused. We try to do things the right way. Even when it's difficult. The right way. A sound like broken glass scraping together. Spawn was laughing. Lady, I've been dead for years. The right way stopped mattering a long time ago. Then maybe it's time you remembered what it felt like. Janeway's voice carried the same steel that had gotten Voyager through Kazon territory, past Vidian hunting grounds, and into the heart of the Delta Quadrant. You're on my ship now, Mr. Simmons. We have rules. You'll follow them, or we'll have a problem. The green glow in Spawn's eyes intensified. For a heartbeat, the temperature in sickbay dropped 10 degrees. The force field crackled with discharge. Then, slowly, the symbiote retreated, chains retracting until they were once again wrapped around his torso. Your ship. Your rules. The words carried weight, acknowledgement, if not agreement. But if something threatens this crew, I'm not asking permission to act. Fair enough. Janeway nodded once. Doctor, prepare him for transport to Cargo Bay 2. Tuvok, coordinate with Torres. I want that power coupling ready in 30 minutes. As they filed out, Chakotay lingered near the door. Captain, are you sure about this? We don't know what he's capable of. No, we don't. But I know what it's like to be stranded far from home with no way back. Janeway's gaze drifted to the viewport, where stars streaked past in the endless dark. If we start turning away everyone who doesn't fit our understanding of the universe, we become exactly what we're fighting against out here. In the cargo bay, B'Elanna Torres cursed in Klingon as she rerouted power conduits with controlled fury. Engineering challenges she understood. Impossible undead warriors with sentient symbiotes? That was above her pay grade. But she'd make it work. She always did. In his alcove, 7 of 9 monitored the situation through Voyager's internal sensors. Her Borg implants cataloged the energy signature, cross-referencing it against the collective's vast database. No matches. The Borg had never encountered anything like Spawn. Her ocular implant tracked the power fluctuations. Fascinating. Dangerous. Unique. The Borg Queen would want to know about this. But 7 of 9 was no longer Borg. She was an individual. And individuals made choices. She chose to wait. To observe. To see what this impossible man would do next. Far beyond Voyager's sensor range, a Borg cube altered course, The energy signature it had detected was fading, but the collective's interest had been piqued. New biological and technological distinctiveness. Resistance, as always, would be futile. Cargo Bay 2 had been transformed into a makeshift containment chamber. B'Elanna Torres stood before a jury-rigged power coupling that hummed with barely controlled energy, her half-Klingon features set in concentration. Conduits ran from the coupling to a modified isolation field generator, creating a sphere of shimmering energy in the center of the bay. "This is either going to stabilize him or blow a hole through 3 decks," she muttered, making final adjustments to the inverse warp field generator. "Your confidence is inspiring, Lieutenant." The doctor materialized beside her, medical kit in hand. "I'm routing power through a negative space wedge emitter calibrated to match his energy signature. The problem is, his energy signature keeps changing." She gestured at her tricorder readings. 1 second it's reading like concentrated antimatter, the next it's showing properties similar to subspace tears. It's like trying to tune a warp core to a song that keeps changing key. Poetic. Also accurate. The doctor checked his instruments. "The symbiote is attempting to adapt to our universe's physical laws, but it's struggling. Think of it as a life form designed for water trying to breathe air." Janeway entered with Tuvok and a 4-person security detail. "Status?" "Ready as we'll ever be, Captain." B'Elanna wiped her hands on her uniform. "I've created a controlled pocket of exotic particles inside the containment field. If the symbiote can feed on inverse warp signatures and negative energy states, this should stabilize him. If not, we'll adapt." Janeway nodded to Tuvok. "Bring him in." The doors opened. Spawn walked between 2 security officers, his movements slow and deliberate. The symbiote hung limp against his body, the cape dragging on the deck plating like dead weight. Even the chains seemed diminished, their metallic sheen dulled to matte black. "You look worse than when you arrived," Janeway observed. "Feel worse too." Spawn's voice was a bare rasp now. "The symbiote's cannibalizing my necroplasm reserves. When those run out..." He didn't finish the sentence. "Then let's not wait." B'Elanna activated the containment field. "Step inside. The field will generate the particle emissions your symbiote needs. At least, that's the theory." Spawn moved into the shimmering sphere. The moment he crossed the threshold, the symbiote reacted. The cape snapped upright, spreading wide like demonic wings. The armor pulsed with renewed energy, green luminescence racing across its surface in fractal patterns. Spawn's entire body arched backward as the symbiote drank deeply from the inverse field. "It's working!" The doctor monitored the readings. "His energy levels are stabilizing. The symbiote is metabolizing the exotic particles and converting them into... I'm not entirely sure what, but his vital signs are improving." Janeway watched as Spawn slowly lowered his arms, the green glow in his eyes brightening from dying embers to controlled flame. "How do you feel?" "Like I can breathe again. If I still breathed." Spawn flexed his hands, chains rattling with renewed vigor. "Your engineer is good. This is buying time." "Just time?" B'Elanna's ridge-lined forehead creased. "I created a stable power source. This should sustain you indefinitely. In here, maybe. But I can't live in a containment field." Spawn turned those burning eyes on Janeway. "And something tells me you don't want me on your ship permanently. One problem at a time, Mr. Simmons." Janeway folded her arms. "First, we need to understand what brought you here." "Tuvok, analysis of the subspace rupture?" The Vulcan consulted his PADD. "The rupture's residual energy signature suggests a transdimensional breach originating from a realm with fundamentally different physical laws. The energy composition included elements our sensors classify as impossible, negative mass, inverse quantum states, and what appears to be concentrated psychic resonance." "Hell," Spawn said flatly. "You're describing hell. Or at least, one version of it." Chakotay stepped forward, his spiritual nature peaked. You're saying hell is real? An actual dimension? Where I come from? Yeah. It's real. Run by a demon lord named Malbalgia. He creates Hellspawn, soldiers for his army. Resurrects dead men, bonds them with symbiotes, sends them back to Earth to collect souls. Spawn's fists clenched. I was a government assassin. Got murdered. Made a deal to see my wife again. Malbalgia twisted the deal. Sent me back 5 years later, gave me this. He gestured to the symbiote. And expected me to kill for him. But you didn't. It wasn't a question from Janeway, but a statement. No. I fought back. Been fighting ever since. Spawn looked down at his clawed hands. The symbiote gives me power, strength, speed, the chains, the cape, necromancy, teleportation. But it's also a leash. Use too much power, and I burn through my necroplasm reserves. Run out completely, and I go back to hell. Permanently. The doctor's eyes widened. So you operate on a finite energy budget? How much do you have left? Spawn's mask couldn't show expression, but his body language radiated grim humor. Used to have a counter. 9:9:9:9:9:9. Every transformation, every major power use, it ticked down. Lost track somewhere around 4:3:2:7:1. I've been running on fumes and spite for a while now. Then this containment field is doing more than stabilizing you. B'Elanna realized. It's recharging you. The exotic particles are acting like fresh necroplasm. Which raises an interesting question. Tuvok's logical mind cut through to the core issue. If Mr. Simmons can replenish his energy reserves using technology available on this ship, he is no longer bound by the limitations imposed by his demonic benefactor. He has, in effect, found a loophole in his supernatural contract. Spawn went very still. The implications sank in slowly. You're saying I could break free. Actually break free. Possibly. The doctor was already calculating. If we can calibrate a portable version of this field, something you could wear or carry, you wouldn't need to return to hell for power. You'd be self-sufficient. There's a lot of ifs in that statement document. But for the first time since arriving, something like hope crept into Spawn's voice. Janeway saw the shift and made a command decision. We'll work on it. But Mr. Simmons, if we help you achieve independence from this Malbalgia, I need something from you in return. There's always a price. The hope dimmed. What do you want? Your help. We're stranded in the Delta Quadrant, 70,000 light-years from home. The journey is dangerous. We face hostile species, spatial anomalies, and worse on a regular basis. If you're going to be on this ship while we develop a solution for you, you contribute. You protect this crew. I'm not a soldier anymore. I'm not asking you to be. Janeway's voice softened slightly. I'm asking you to do what you've been doing since you escaped Hell's control. Protect the innocent. Help those who can't help themselves. Just this time, do it alongside a crew instead of alone. Spawn studied her through the containment field. Captain Catherine Janeway stood barely over 5 feet, human, unarmed, and utterly unafraid of a creature that could kill her in seconds. Her crew stood behind her, not in fear, but in solidarity. Alien faces, the Vulcan's stoic calm, the half-Klingon's fierce determination, the hologram's analytical curiosity. They were stranded. Lost. Just like him. Okay. The word came out rough. I'll help. But I work my way. No Starfleet protocols telling me when I can or can't act. We'll negotiate the details. Janeway allowed herself a small smile. Welcome aboard Voyager, Mr. Simmons. A proximity alert blared across the cargo bay. Everyone's attention snapped to Tuvok as he accessed the wall panel. Captain, long-range sensors have detected a vessel on intercept course. Configuration matches Borg. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. B'Elanna's hand went to her phaser. Chakotay's jaw tightened. Even the doctor's holographic composure flickered. Distance? Janeway's voice was ice. 16 light years. At current speed, they will intercept us in 47 minutes. Spawn watched the crew's reaction, the fear they tried to hide, the tension that suddenly filled the bay. Borg. What are they? 7 of 9's voice came over the comm system, cold and precise. Captain, the Borg cube has altered course directly toward our position. They are scanning our ship. They have detected the exotic energy signature in Cargo Bay 2. Janeway's eyes met Spawn's through the containment field. The Borg are a cybernetic collective. They assimilate entire species, inject them with nanoprobes, strip away their individuality, and add them to a hive mind. They've assimilated thousands of civilizations. They adapt to any weapon, any defense. And they're coming here because they've detected you. They want to assimilate me. Spawn's chains began to move, sliding across his armor with predatory intent. They want to make me part of their hive. Yes. A sound emerged from behind Spawn's mask, low, resonant, building into something between a growl and a laugh. The symbiote spread across the containment field's interior surface like ink in water, testing its boundaries. Captain, you wanted my help protecting your crew? The green glow in Spawn's eyes blazed incandescent. You're about to get it. Because if there's one thing I hate more than demons, it's things that steal free will. The cargo bay lights flickered. The containment field crackled with excess energy. And deep within Al Simmons, the symbiote tasted prey. The Borg were coming. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Red alert klaxons wailed through Voyager's corridors. Janeway strode onto the bridge, Chakotay and Tuvok flanking her, while Spawn remained in Cargo Bay 2 under guard. The view screen displayed what every Starfleet officer dreaded, a Borg cube, massive and geometrically perfect, closing the distance with inexorable precision. Report. Janeway dropped into her command chair, hands already gripping the armrests. Borg cube, standard configuration, Harry Kim said from Ops, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. They're scanning us with multiple tachyon beams. Focus primarily on Cargo Bay 2. Tom Paris glanced back from the helm. They're definitely interested in our new guest. Distance? 12 light years in closing. At current speed, intercept in 32 minutes. Janeway tapped her comm badge. Janeway to Cargo Bay 2. Mr. Simmons, we need to talk about what the Borg can do. Spawn's voice crackled back, distorted by the containment field's interference. I'm listening. The Borg assimilate through injection of nanoprobes, microscopic machines that rewrite your biology at the cellular level. They strip away identity, free will, everything that makes you an individual. You become a drone. Part of the collective's hive mind. She paused. They've assimilated entire species. Billions of individuals erased, turned into extensions of a single consciousness. How do you fight them? You don't. Not conventionally. Janeway's jaw tightened. They adapt to energy weapons after a few shots. Shields become useless. The only defense is to run or find something they've never encountered before. A laugh, dark and humorless, echoed over the comm. Then they've definitely never encountered me. Question is, can your ship outrun them? Tuvok answered. Negative. The Borg cube's maximum velocity exceeds our own. Evasion is not a viable option. 7 of 9 to the bridge. The former drone's voice cut through the tension. Captain, I must speak with you regarding the Borg's interest in our passenger. It is significant. Go ahead, 7. I have accessed my Borg memories. The collective has encountered dimensional anomalies before, but never a life form that exists in a state of perpetual death while maintaining full consciousness and tactical capability. To the Borg, Mr. Simmons represents Species 0, a designation reserved for biological impossibilities that would grant the collective unprecedented advantages. Kim turned from his station. Species 0? I thought the Borg numbered species as they encountered them. They do. Species 0 is theoretical. A classification created for entities that should not exist according to known physical laws but do anyway. Seven's voice carried a rare note of uncertainty. If the Borg successfully assimilate Mr. Simmons and his symbiote, they would gain access to necroplasmic energy, transdimensional technology, and potentially the ability to operate independently of conventional life support requirements. It would make them significantly more dangerous. Yeah, that's not happening. Spawn's voice had gone cold. I've been controlled before. Manipulated. Had my strings pulled by demons and government handlers. Nobody puts me in a box again. Janeway made a decision. Deactivate the containment field. B'Elanna, monitor his energy levels and be ready to reinitialize if he destabilizes. Captain? Chakotay's concern was evident. If the Borg are coming for him anyway, keeping him in a cage won't help. And if we're going to survive this, I need to know what he can actually do. She raised her voice. Mr. Simmons, you're free to move about the ship, but you follow my tactical officer's instructions. Understood? Understood. The containment field shimmered and died. Spawn stepped out of the sphere, the symbiote rippling with renewed vitality. His cape billowed despite the absence of wind, and the chains wrapped around his torso clinked softly as he moved toward the cargo bay exit. B'Elanna watched him go, then tapped her comm badge. Torres to bridge. His energy signature is stable. Whatever that field did, it's holding. For now. On the bridge, the turbolift doors opened. Spawn emerged, and the entire bridge crew turned to stare. He cut an impossible figure against Voyager's clean Starfleet aesthetic. Death incarnated, wrapped in living shadows, radiating power that made the air taste like ozone and ash. Tom Paris whistled low. Okay, that's terrifying. Mr. Paris' status? Janeway kept her eyes on the view screen, refusing to show the unease crawling up her spine. Borg cube now 8 light-years out. They've increased speed. Intercept in 19 minutes. Spawn moved to stand beside Janeway's chair, studying the tactical display. That's a big ship. 3 kilometers per side. Crew complement, approximately 64,000 drones. Tuvok's fingers danced across tactical. Heavily shielded, armed with cutting beams and tractor technology capable of holding a vessel our size indefinitely. And you've fought them before? Yes. Janeway's voice was granite. We've survived encounters with the Borg. But survival isn't victory. Every time we face them, we lose something: crew members, resources, time. They're relentless. Spawn's masked face turned toward her. You're scared of them. Anyone with sense is scared of the Borg, Mr. Simmons. She met his burning gaze. But fear doesn't mean we stop fighting. Good. The chains around Spawn's body began to extend, links multiplying, sliding across his armor like serpents preparing to strike. Because I'm going to give you a tactical advantage the Borg have never seen. 7 of 9 entered from the port corridor, her ocular implant tracking Spawn's movements. She stopped 3 meters away, her Borg-enhanced instincts warring with her human curiosity. You believe you can defeat a Borg cube alone? No. Spawn's honesty surprised them. But I can hurt them. Confuse them. Make them think twice about assimilating your ship. The Borg do not experience doubt. 7 stated flatly. Then I'll teach them. Spawn turned back to Janeway. I need to know how they assimilate. The process. Every detail. 7's human eye narrowed. Why? Because the symbiote is sentient. It's already dead. It exists outside conventional biology. A note of grim satisfaction entered his voice. I want to know what happens when the Borg try to inject nanoprobes into something that's been to hell and back. Understanding dawned on Janeway's face. You want them to try to assimilate you. I want to see if their nanoprobes can survive contact with necroplasm. Spawn's cape spread wide, revealing geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. The symbiote doesn't just keep me alive. It's a weapon. It corrupts. Transforms. If Borg technology tries to rewrite my biology, the symbiote will fight back. And I don't think their nanoprobes are designed to handle something that's already been rewritten by hell itself. Tuvok's eyebrow rose fractionally. You propose to weaponize the assimilation process against the Borg. Exactly. That is tactically sound, but extraordinarily dangerous, Seven said. Borg nanoprobes are designed to assimilate any biological or technological system. If they succeed in adapting to your symbiote, you will be lost. I've been lost before. Spawn's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. Found my way back. Besides, you said it yourself, I'm species 0. Something that shouldn't exist. Let's see if their hive mind can handle that. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of systems and the steady beep of the Borg's approach. Janeway studied Spawn, this impossible man wrapped in death and determination. Every Starfleet regulation screamed at her to find another way. But out here, 70,000 light-years from home, regulations were luxuries they couldn't always afford. Kim, open a channel to the Borg cube. Channel open, Captain? Janeway stood, facing the view screen with the authority of someone who negotiated with species that wanted her dead and won. Borg vessel, this is Captain Catherine Janeway of the Federation starship Voyager. The entity you've detected aboard our ship is under our protection. Stand down and alter your course. The response was immediate, synthesized voices speaking as one. We are the Borg. You will lower your shields and prepare to be assimilated. The biological impossibility designated species 0 will be added to the collective. Resistance is futile. Yeah, I'm getting real tired of that phrase. Spawn stepped forward. Tell them they can try. But I'm coming to them. Let's see if their collective can stomach a Hellspawn. Janeway cut the channel. You're serious about this? Dead serious. A pause. No pun intended. Captain, the Borg cube is now 4 light-years away. Kim reported. They're charging weapons. Chakotay moved to Janeway's side. Catherine, we can't let him board that cube alone. It's suicide. Is it? Janeway looked at Spawn. What do you need from us? A way onto that cube. Your transporter technology. Can it beam me through their shields? B'Elanna's voice came over the comm from engineering. Not conventionally. But if we modulate our transporter to match the Borg's rotating shield frequencies, we might get a narrow window. Maybe 3 seconds. That's all I need. Spawn's chains retracted, coiling tight against his body. Get me close. Beam me into their ship. I'll do the rest. And if the assimilation works? Janeway had to ask. If the nanoprobes turn you into a drone? Then you blow that cube into subatomic particles and don't look back. Spawn's voice carried absolute conviction. I'd rather be dead than a slave. Again. 7 of 9 stepped closer, her human hand reaching out as if to touch him, then pulling back. You are either very brave or very foolish. I'm dead. Brave and foolish stopped mattering a long time ago. The tactical display showed the Borg cube entering visual range. On screen it appeared. Geometric perfection, vast and indifferent, studded with technology that had ended civilizations. Janeway took a breath. Mr. Simmons, if you survive this, we'll find a way to get you home. That's a promise. Home. Spawn looked at the cube growing larger on screen. Haven't had one of those in years. But I appreciate the thought, Captain. Torres, prepare for site-to-site transport. Target the Borg cube's interior, somewhere they won't immediately adapt to his presence. Locking onto their propulsion matrix. It's heavily trafficked by drones. He'll have company immediately. Perfect. Spawn's entire body began to glow with green energy, the symbiote spreading across him like living armor. The cape extended fully, fractal patterns appearing in its depths, shapes that suggested wings, claws, things with too many angles. One more thing, Captain. When this goes wrong, and it might, don't send a rescue team. If the Borg get me, I'm already gone. Noted. And Mr. Simmons? Yeah? Give them hell. A death's head grin, impossible to see but somehow felt, That's exactly what I'm bringing them. The transporter beam seized Spawn, breaking him into golden particles. For a moment his form held, a specter of chains and darkness, then scattered across subspace toward the waiting cube. On the Borg vessel, proximity alarms triggered. Drones converged on the materialization point. The collective processed new data, calculating threat assessments, preparing assimilation protocols. They had encountered gods, Q species from fluidic space. They had adapted to everything. But they had never encountered hell. Spawn materialized in the heart of the cube, surrounded by the cold geometry of Borg perfection, and smiled behind his mask. Let's dance. The Borg cube's interior was a cathedral of technology. Conduits running like veins through metallic walls, alcoves housing dormant drones in rows that stretched beyond sight, and the constant background hum of the collective's trillion thoughts processing in unison. Green light bathed everything, giving the space an otherworldly, sickly glow. Spawn materialized in the propulsion matrix, a vast chamber where massive transwarp coils pulsed with exotic energy. Drones turned as one, their ocular implants focusing on the intruder. 20, 30, 40 cybernetic beings moving with mechanical precision, arms extending to reveal assimilation tubules that glinted in the green light. We are the Borg. You will be assimilated. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Resistance is... Spawn's chains exploded outward. The nearest 3 drones were impaled before the collective could process the attack. Chains punched through chest plates, wrapped around limbs, and yanked bodies apart with casual brutality. Sparks flew. Borg blood, black and thick with nanoprobes, sprayed across the deck plating. Futile. Yeah, I've heard. Spawn retracted the chains, hurling the broken drones into their advancing companions. Let me tell you what's futile, trying to make me into something I'm not. The collective adapted instantly. The next wave of drones approached with shields activated, personal force fields shimmering around their bodies. Assimilation tubules extended. They moved faster now, coordinated, learning from the first attack. Spawn's cape lashed out like a living whip, wrapping around a drone's head and twisting. The neck snapped with a wet crunch. The symbiote flowed across another drone's shields, finding microscopic gaps, seeping through and dissolving the cybernetic implants from the inside out. The drone convulsed, its human eye widening in something that might have been terror before it collapsed. Adaptation detected. The collective's voices droned. Recalibrating defensive protocols. Species 0 demonstrates biological weapon capability. Threat assessment, maximum. More drones poured into the chamber. Dozens became hundreds. They came from every corridor, every access point, a flood of cybernetic bodies converging on a single target. The collective brought its full attention to bear. Processing power that could coordinate fleet actions across light years focused on one impossible man. Spawn stood in the center of the maelstrom, chains whirling in defensive patterns, cape blocking assimilation tubules, the symbiote burning with green fire. He was fast, faster than human, but there were too many. A tubule punched through his defense, slamming into his shoulder. Nanoprobes flooded into his system. The Borg expected immediate compliance. Nanoprobes were designed to rewrite biology in seconds, suppress consciousness, establish neural connection to the hive mind. Trillions of microscopic machines invaded Spawn's necrotic tissue, seeking living cells to convert. They found necroplasm instead. On Voyager's bridge, 7 of 9 gasped, her hand flying to her temple. Captain, the collective is experiencing confusion. The assimilation is not proceeding as expected. What's happening? Janeway leaned forward in her chair, eyes fixed on the tactical display showing the Borg cube. The nanoprobes are attempting to rewrite his cellular structure, but his cells are already dead. They are seeking neural pathways to suppress consciousness, but his consciousness does not reside in his brain tissue. Seven's voice took on a note of wonder. The collective cannot comprehend what it is encountering. It is struggling. Inside the cube, Spawn screamed. Not in pain, in fury. The nanoprobes writhed through his system, attempting to establish control, but the symbiote fought back. For every nanoprobe that tried to rewrite necroplasm, the necroplasm consumed 3 more. The symbiote treated the invasion like food, breaking down Borg technology and converting it into raw energy. "That's new!" Spawn's voice was strained but filled with dark satisfaction. "You taste like burnt circuits and desperation." The collective recognized failure. The drones injecting him pulled back, but Spawn's chains caught them, dragged them close. Where his hands touched Borg flesh, the symbiote spread. Black and green corruption flowing across cybernetic implants, seeping into neural interfaces. A drone's eye flickered. Its movements became erratic. It turned toward its companions and attacked. "Warning!" The collective's synthesized voice took on an edge of something almost like alarm. "Corrupted drone detected in alcove 729. Virus signature unknown. Initiating quarantine protocols." But it was too late. The symbiote had learned. Where Borg nanoprobes rewrote biology to create drones, the symbiote rewrote the nanoprobes themselves. The corrupted drone's tubules injected modified nanoprobes into the next drone. Then another. A cascade effect rippling through the collective's local network. 7 of 9 staggered on Voyager's bridge, her Borg implants burning. "Captain, something is spreading through the cube." The collective is attempting to sever connections to infected drones, but the contamination is adapting faster than they can respond. "Is it Spawn?" Chakotay asked. "It is his symbiote. It has weaponized the assimilation process." Seven's voice carried horrified fascination. The Borg designed nanoprobes to convert biological systems. The symbiote has converted the nanoprobes. It is turning their greatest weapon against them. On the tactical display, energy readings from the Borg cube fluctuated wildly. Internal systems began shutting down in sections as the collective attempted to contain the spreading corruption. Inside the cube, Spawn fought his way deeper. Corrupted drones followed him like a shambling army, their movements jerky and uncoordinated but relentlessly violent toward their former brothers. The symbiote had created something new, not Borg, not Hellspawn, but a horrifying hybrid that served neither master. "You wanted my distinctiveness?" Spawn's chains tore through a bulkhead, exposing the trans-warp core beyond. "You wanted to add me to your collective? Congratulations. You just got infected with hell." The collective's voice echoed through the cube, no longer perfectly synthesized but distorted, fragmented. "Species 0, incompatible, purge, must purge." Spawn reached the central plexus, a massive chamber where thousands of drones stood in alcoves, their minds linked directly to the cube's processing core. At the chamber's center, a raised platform held the cube's primary vinculum, the device that coordinated all drone activity within the vessel. He started toward it, then stopped. She was there. Not physically, the Borg Queen resided elsewhere in the collective's vast network, but her presence filled the chamber like ice water. A holographic projection materialized before him, pale skin, cybernetic enhancements running along her skull and spine, eyes that held the cold intelligence of billions. "Species 0. The Queen's voice was different from the drones, individual, almost seductive. "You are destroying my drones. Corrupting my perfection. Your perfection is slavery." Spawn's chains coiled defensively. "I've seen real perfection. This ain't it." The Queen's head tilted, studying him with predatory interest. "You misunderstand the collective. We do not enslave. We liberate. We free individuals from the chaos of separate existence. We grant them purpose, community, immortality through unity." "Yeah? Then why do they scream when you take them?" Spawn had heard the stories from Janeway. "Why do you have to force assimilation if it's such a gift?" The primitive mind fears transcendence. But fear is irrelevant. The Queen moved closer, her hologram's hand reaching out as if to touch his mask. "You intrigue me, Species 0. You exist in a state of death yet maintain consciousness. You wield technology beyond our understanding. You could be so much more within the collective. I could be a lot of things. A slave isn't one of them. Then what do you propose? You cannot destroy this cube alone. Even now, more drones are being awakened. Your corruption spreads, yes, but we adapt. We always adapt. The Queen's smile was terrifying in its confidence. You will tire. Your power reserves will deplete. And then we will dissect you at our leisure. Spawn looked around the chamber at the thousands of alcoves, each holding a person who'd been stolen, converted, erased. He thought of Voyager, a crew stranded and fighting to get home. He thought of his own existence, caught between life and death, fighting for scraps of freedom against cosmic powers that saw him as a tool. The symbiote pulsed against his chest, sharing his thoughts. For once, they were in complete agreement. You're right about one thing, Spawn said quietly. I can't destroy this cube alone. The chains retracted. The cape folded close to his body. He stood before the Queen's projection, seemingly defenseless. But I don't need to destroy it. I just need to give it something it can't digest. He reached up and placed both hands on his chest, where the symbiote's heart, if it had one, would be. Green energy built between his palms, growing brighter, hotter. The symbiote understood. It had fed on the Borg's exotic particles, gorged itself on converted nanoprobes, drunk deep from the cube's power systems. Now it was time to give it all back. Assimilation works both ways, Your Majesty. You take. I give. Let's see which of us breaks first. Spawn released the energy in a pulse that rippled through the cube like a shockwave. Every drone connected to the local plexus convulsed as necroplasmic energy flooded the neural network. The vinculum sparked, overloaded with data it couldn't process, thoughts of hell, memories of death, the screaming chaos of a consciousness that refused to be unified. The Queen's projection flickered. What are you doing? Teaching your collective what it feels like to touch something that shouldn't exist. On Voyager, alarms blared. 7 of 9 collapsed, her neural implants burning with feedback. The doctor caught her, medical tricorder screaming warnings about neural cascade failure. Report! Janeway was on her feet. Kim's voice was shaking. Captain, the Borg cube's power signature is fluctuating massively. Internal systems are failing across multiple sections. Whatever Spawn is doing, it's tearing that ship apart from the inside. The view screen showed the cube's surface rippling with green energy, entire sections going dark as the corruption spread faster than the collective could respond. And deep in the cube's heart, Spawn smiled behind his mask and pushed harder, feeding the symbiote's chaos into a machine designed for perfect order, watching the Borg learn what it meant to choke on impossibility. The Borg cube shuddered like a dying beast. Corridors that had hummed with perfect efficiency now sparked with shorting systems. Drones collapsed in their alcoves, neural connections severed as the vinculum struggled to process the necroplasmic feedback flooding its circuits. The Queen's holographic projection flickered in and out of existence, her face contorting between cold control and something approaching panic. Spawn stood at the epicenter, hands still pressed to his chest, pouring corrupted energy into the cube's neural network. The symbiote screamed in ecstasy. It had never fed like this, never had access to such vast power systems. Every drone it touched became a conduit, every alcove a feeding ground. The Borg's perfection was being rewritten into beautiful, chaotic entropy. Cease this, immediately. The Queen's voice fragmented across multiple frequencies. You are damaging the collective. Irreparable harm. Good. Spawn's voice was barely recognizable, distorted by the power flowing through him. Maybe your hive mind needs to learn that some things can't be assimilated. Can't be controlled. Can't be made to fit. The symbiote's corruption spread through the cube's infrastructure like cancer. Transwarp coils misfired, sending pulses of unstable energy through the propulsion systems. Shield generators cycled randomly. Weapons arrays powered down or fired at nothing. The cube's geometric perfection was fracturing, revealing the horror beneath, 60,000 minds screaming in fragmented unity as their connection to the collective deteriorated. On Voyager's bridge, The crew watched in stunned silence as the Borg vessel that had seemed invincible minutes ago now listed in space, bleeding atmosphere from dozens of breaches. "Harry, what's our status?" Janeway gripped her armrest, torn between relief and concern. "The cube has stopped its approach. Power readings are erratic, some sections completely offline, others surging beyond normal operating parameters." Kim looked up from his console, eyes wide. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildup in their warp core. If it goes critical, how long until detonation? At current rate of increase? 8 minutes. Maybe less." Chakotay moved to her side. "We need to get Spawn out of there. Torres, can you get a lock on him?" Janeway was already moving toward tactical. B'Elanna's frustrated voice crackled back. "Negative, Captain. His energy signature is completely merged with the cube's power systems. I can't isolate him from the background radiation. It's like trying to pick out one photon from a star." 7 of 9 pulled herself upright in her seat near the science station, the doctor still scanning her with concern. Her face was pale, ocular implant dimmed. "Captain, I can still sense the collective's thoughts. They are in disarray. The Queen is attempting to sever this cube from the greater collective to prevent contamination from spreading. She is..." 7 paused, struggling with the concept. "She is afraid." The Borg Queen is afraid? Tom Paris couldn't hide his disbelief. Of Spawn? Of what he represents. Chaos. Individuality taken to its extreme. A consciousness that exists outside all parameters the collective understands. 7's human hand trembled slightly. "The drones on that cube are experiencing something they have not felt since assimilation: confusion, pain, fear. The symbiote is not just corrupting their systems, it is forcing them to feel again." Inside the cube, Spawn felt the resistance weakening. The Queen's presence was fading, her connection to this vessel severing as she abandoned it to save the greater collective. Thousands of drones stood motionless now, their hive mind connection broken, leaving them as empty shells with fragmentary consciousness struggling to understand existence without unity. He could destroy them all. The symbiote urged him to consume, to feed, to burn this entire vessel and everyone on it into necroplasmic ash. The power was there, thrumming through his body in quantities he never possessed before. With this much energy, he could teleport across light years, reshape matter, perhaps even tear open a gateway back to his own universe. But as he looked at the nearest drone, a woman, human, young, with terror slowly dawning in her remaining organic eye as individual thought returned, he saw something else. Victims. These weren't soldiers or demons. They were stolen people. Kidnapped. Violated. Transformed into weapons against their will. Just like him. Spawn released his grip on the energy flow. The green light dimmed. The symbiote howled in protest, but he forced it into submission. "No. We're done here." The Queen's hologram reformed one final time, barely stable. "You spare them? Why?" "Because I remember what it's like to be used. To have your body turned into someone else's weapon." Spawn looked directly at the hologram. "These drones didn't choose this. You chose for them. That makes them prisoners, not enemies. Sentiment is irrelevant. You have crippled this vessel. The warp core approaches critical failure. All aboard will be terminated." The Queen's face showed no emotion. "Your mercy is meaningless. Maybe. But it's mine to give." Spawn tapped the chains wrapped around his torso. A gesture 7 of 9 had shown him earlier. "Voyager, I need emergency transport. All of me this time, including the corrupted drones. Can you pull that off?" There was a pause. Then Janeway's voice, tight with urgency. "Mr. Simmons, we can't transport that many at once. Our transporter capacity. Then make multiple trips. You've got..." He glanced at the failing warp core. "About 6 minutes before this ship becomes a very large bomb." B'Elanna's voice cut in. "Captain, he's insane." Even if we could lock onto that many targets in the interference, we don't have cargo space for hundreds of Borg drones. Then we make space. Clear cargo bays 1, 2, and 3. Vent atmosphere if you have to, but prep for mass transport. Janeway's command voice was absolute. Tuvok, work with Torres. Get me transport solutions now. Captain, the logical course of action is to retrieve Mr. Simmons and allow the cube to belay that, Commander. Those are people on that ship. Violated, corrupted people, but people nonetheless. We're getting as many out as we can. That's in order. Spawn felt something unexpected, respect. This Janeway didn't just talk about doing the right thing, she did it, even when it was tactically insane. Even when her crew thought she was crazy. She reminded him of someone he used to be, a long time ago, before Hell and Resurrection taught him that mercy was a luxury. Voyager crew, you heard your captain. I'm rounding up every drone that's still functional. Spawn's chains extended, wrapping around the nearest corrupted drones, physically dragging them toward the central chamber. The ones too far gone I'll handle. But the ones we can save, we save. The next 5 minutes were controlled chaos. Spawn moved through the cube like a demon conducting triage. Drones with too much cybernetic corruption, those whose organic components had deteriorated beyond recovery, he granted mercy. A quick strike, no pain, release from the half-life the Borg had given them. Those with sufficient biological matter remaining, he gathered in groups, marking them with pulses of necroplasmic energy so Voyager's transporters could lock on. On Voyager, the transporter rooms ran continuously. Operators materialized group after group of Borg drones, confused, frightened, dangerous, directly into cargo bays that had been hastily converted to holding cells with force fields. The doctor replicated sedatives by the case, assisted by 7 of 9 who moved through the crowds of her former brothers and sisters with clinical efficiency hiding deep emotional turmoil. 2 minutes to core breach. Kim called out. Captain, we've recovered 147 drones. Spawn is still aboard. One more group. B'Elanna reported. I've got a lock on him and 38 additional life signs. Energizing now. The transporter beam seized Spawn and his final collection of drones, scattering them across subspace just as the Borg cube's warp core reached critical mass. The explosion was silent in vacuum but spectacular, a sphere of white-hot energy expanding outward, consuming the geometric hull, vaporizing everything inside. Spawn materialized on Voyager's transporter pad just as the shockwave hit the ship. Voyager lurched, shields flaring as they absorbed the blast's edge. He staggered, the symbiote's energy reserves finally depleted from the sustained combat and the effort of marking so many drones for transport. The cargo bay doors opened. Janeway stood there with a security team, phasers ready but not raised. Warp core? Spawn asked. Destroyed. We're reading dispersing plasma and debris. Nothing survived. She studied him, the dimmed glow in his eyes, the way his cape hung limp, the chains barely moving. You look like hell. Feel like it too. He sat down heavily on the transporter pad. How many did we get? 185 drones. 70% human, the rest a mix of species from across the Delta Quadrant. Janeway's expression softened marginally. The doctor says some of them might be recoverable. Their connection to the collective is severed. With time and treatment, they could regain individuality. Some. Not all. No. Not all. She didn't sugarcoat it. But some is better than none. You gave them a chance, Mr. Simmons. That matters. Spawn looked down at his hands. They were trembling, whether from exhaustion or something else, he couldn't tell. I should have killed them all. Would have been cleaner. Safer for your ship. Probably. But you didn't. Janeway sat down on the edge of the transporter platform, ignoring protocol and the security team's nervous glances. You chose mercy when you could have chosen vengeance. That's not the action of a monster. I'm still a monster, Captain. Just one that occasionally makes decent choices. Then keep making them. She stood, offering him her hand. Come on. Doctor needs to check you over, and Torres wants to recalibrate that containment field. You've earned some rest. Spawn took her hand, letting her help him up. The gesture was simple but carried weight, trust, acceptance, the beginning of something that might eventually be called friendship. As they walked towards sickbay, alarms blared again. Different this time. Not red alert but proximity warnings. Bridge to Captain Janeway. Chakotay's voice was tense. We've got company. 3 Borg cubes just appeared on long-range sensors. They're heading straight for us. Janeway and Spawn exchanged looks. The Queen's not done with us, Spawn said flatly. No, Janeway agreed. She's not. Janeway sprinted toward the bridge, Spawn following despite his depleted state. The turbolift ride felt interminable. When the doors opened, the view screen showed 3 Borg cubes in formation, their geometric perfection unmarred, advancing with inexorable purpose. Distance? Janeway dropped into her command chair. 22 light-years and closing, Tuvok reported. At maximum transwarp, they will intercept in 37 minutes. Captain, these are not standard pursuit cubes. Sensor analysis indicates enhanced shielding and weapons arrays. The collective has designated us a priority threat. Tom Paris looked back from the helm, his usual humor absent. 3 cubes. We barely survived one, and that was with Spawn tearing it apart from inside. Spawn moved to the science station where 7 of 9 worked, her fingers flying across the controls despite her obvious exhaustion. Can they track us if we run? Yes. 7 didn't look up. The collective has our warp signature. They have adapted their sensors to detect necroplasmic energy. As long as you remain aboard this vessel, they will find us. Then I leave. Mr. Simmons, Janeway began. No, hear me out. Spawn leaned against the console, the symbiote barely managing to keep him upright. The Queen wants me. Species 0. That's what this is about. I board a shuttle, lead them away, you get clear. And then what? Chakotay crossed his arms. You're barely standing. Your energy reserves are depleted. Even if you survived long enough to draw them off, they'd eventually destroy you and come back for us anyway. He's right, 7 said quietly. The Queen does not abandon objectives. She will pursue both you and Voyager. Separation merely delays the inevitable. Harry Kim turned from ops, his young face etched with stress. Captain, I'm detecting subspace communications between the cubes. They're coordinating their approach vectors to cut off all escape routes. They're boxing us in. Janeway's mind raced through tactical scenarios. Run, they'd be caught. Fight. 3 cubes would overwhelm Voyager's defenses in minutes. Surrender, not an option. Hide, nowhere to hide in open space. She was running out of options fast. 7. What did the Queen say when you were connected to the collective? What exactly does she want from Spawn? 7's human eye closed briefly, accessing memories she'd rather not revisit. The Queen believes that by assimilating Species 0, she can grant the collective access to dimensional travel, necroplasmic energy sources, and most critically, the ability to exist independently of conventional life support. She views Mr. Simmons as the key to Borg evolution, transcendence beyond their current limitations. So she's obsessed with him. Janeway's tactical mind began to see an angle. Obsession creates blind spots. Fixation breeds mistakes. Captain? Tuvok raised an eyebrow. The Queen wants Spawn because he's unique. What if we gave her something even more unique? Something the collective has never encountered before? Spawn's masked face turned toward her. What are you thinking? B'Elanna, how much power would it take to recreate that inverse warp field you used to stabilize Spawn, but on a much larger scale? Torres's voice came back immediately, suspicious and intrigued. Define much larger, Captain. Large enough to envelop this entire ship. large enough to create a bubble of exotic particles and negative energy that would read to Borg sensors as hundreds of spawn-level energy signatures. Understanding dawned on Chakotay's face. You want to create false targets. Overwhelm their sensors with so much data they can't identify the real spawn. Exactly. The Borg adapt to threats they understand. But what happens when they're faced with sensory input that contradicts all their models? When every reading tells them there are hundreds of species zeros aboard one ship. B'Elanna was already running calculations. It would drain our warp core to critical levels. We'd have maybe 10 minutes of power before complete shutdown. And that's if the exotic particle generation doesn't tear the ship apart first. 10 minutes is all we need. Janeway stood, pacing as the plan crystallized. 7. How does the collective handle paradoxical data? They analyze, categorize, and integrate. If the data cannot be integrated, they attempt to acquire physical samples for direct examination. Which means they'd send drones to board us. Small teams, not full-scale assimilation. Janeway turned to Spawn. Think you've got enough left in the tank for close-quarters combat? The green glow in Spawn's eyes brightened slightly. Against boarding parties? Yeah. I can manage that. Tuvok, prepare security teams. Standard anti-Borg protocols. Rotating phaser frequencies, proximity charges, the works. But keep them back from the primary breach points. Let Spawn handle the initial contact. Captain, you are proposing to intentionally allow Borg drones to board Voyager. Tuvok's tone suggested he found this logic questionable. I'm proposing we control the engagement. We choose where they board, how many, and on our terms. Janeway's eyes gleamed with the dangerous intelligence that had kept Voyager alive for 3 years. The Queen wants Spawn. Let's give her a first-hand demonstration of why assimilating him was a terrible idea. Tom Paris grinned despite the tension. I love it when the captain gets that look. It usually means we're about to do something incredibly dangerous and possibly brilliant. Possibly suicidal, Kim muttered. That too. Spawn moved to stand beside Janeway's chair. You're betting a lot on me not collapsing in the middle of a fight. You destroyed a Borg cube from the inside and rescued nearly 200 drones while doing it. I think you've earned some trust. She met his gaze. Can you do this? The symbiote rippled across his armor, drawing what little power remained from the ambient ship's systems. The cape spread slightly, testing its strength. The chains clinked softly, preparing. Yeah. I can do this. But Captain, when this is over, that containment field better be ready. I'm running on fumes and spite. Torres? Already on it. I'll have the field ready in cargo bay too. Just try not to die before you get there. No promises. The Borg cubes closed to 15 light years. 14. 13. B'Elanna worked frantically in engineering, rerouting power conduits, and jury-rigging the inverse warp field generators to create a ship-wide effect. Sparks flew from overloaded systems. The warp core pulsed dangerously bright as she pushed it beyond safe parameters. Torres to bridge. Field generators are online. Ready to activate on your command. But Captain, I'm serious about the 10-minute limit. After that, we're dead in space. Understood. Stand by. The Borg cubes dropped out of transwarp at the edge of sensor range, their formation perfect, their approach inexorable. The view screen showed all three, massive, identical, unstoppable. The synthesized voice of the collective filled the bridge. Federation Vessel Voyager. You will surrender Species 0. Resistance will be met with immediate assimilation. You have 30 seconds to comply. Janeway smiled, cold and sharp. Mr. Paris, full impulse on my mark. Evasive pattern Omega-3. Tuvok, prepare to drop shields at designated breach points on my command. Torres, activate the inverse field. Captain, dropping shields with 3 Borg cubes in weapons range. We'll give them exactly what they want. Boarding access. On our terms. She leaned forward. All hands, this is the captain. brace for Borg boarding action. Security teams to designated positions. Engage at will, but let Spawn clear the breach points first. Janeway out. Spawn positioned himself in Corridor 7, Deck 4, the primary breach point they'd identified. The hallway was empty except for him, emergency lighting casting long shadows. He could feel the symbiote gathering what little power remained, preparing for one final expenditure of energy. Torres, activate field. Now. The inverse warp field snapped into existence around Voyager like a bubble of impossible physics. Immediately, the ship's interior lit up with hundreds of false energy signatures, each reading as spawn-level necroplasmic power. The exotic particles flooded every deck, every compartment, creating a sensory nightmare for Borg scanners. On the cubes, confusion rippled through the collective. Sensors reported contradictory data. Species Zero was everywhere and nowhere. The readings suggested biological impossibility on a ship-wide scale. The Queen's voice, for the first time, carried uncertainty. Impossible. Species Zero cannot replicate. Analysis required. Dispatch boarding parties. Acquire physical samples. Determine source of anomaly. They're taking the bait. 7 reported. The cubes are launching assault craft. 20 vessels, each carrying 12 drones. Tuvok, drop shields at breach points Alpha through Delta. Make it look like we're overwhelmed. The shields flickered and failed at 4 specific points along Voyager's hull. Borg cutting beams sliced through the ablative armor like paper. Bulkheads peeled back. Atmosphere vented in controlled bursts. And the drones came through. Spawn heard them before he saw them, the mechanical precision of their footsteps, the whir of servos, the hum of assimilation tubules extending. 12 drones rounded the corner in perfect formation, their ocular implants scanning for targets. They found one. We are the Borg. You will be. Spawn's chains erupted forward with enough force to punch through the lead drone's chest and embed in the bulkhead behind it. He yanked, and the drone came apart in a spray of cybernetic components and black blood. Yeah? Assimilated. Feudal. I've heard the speech. He retracted the chains, using them like whips to sweep 3 more drones off their feet. Here's one you haven't heard. Get off my ship. The remaining 8 drones adapted, shields activating, approaching in a coordinated pattern designed to overwhelm single targets. But Spawn wasn't a single target. He was a moving battlefield. The cape lashed out independently, wrapping around limbs and necks. The chains moved with serpentine intelligence, finding gaps in shields. The symbiote itself became a weapon, flowing across his hands and hardening into claws that tore through Borg armor. One drone managed to inject assimilation tubules into Spawn's arm. Nanoprobes flooded into his system, and immediately began screaming error codes as the necroplasm consumed them. The drone convulsed, its connection to the collective severed as corrupted data fed back through the neural link. Spawn grabbed the drone's head with both hands. Message for your queen, I'm not your evolution. I'm your extinction event. He released a pulse of necroplasmic energy directly into the drone's neural interface. The feedback cascaded through the boarding party's network, frying their collective consciousness. 12 bodies hit the deck, smoke rising from burnout implants. Breach point Alpha secured. Spawn reported, breathing hard. Where's the next group? Breach point Beta, Deck 6. Tuvok responded. 18 drones, heading for engineering. On my way. Spawn teleported, a short jump that cost him precious energy reserves but got him to engineering's outer corridor in seconds. He materialized between the Borg drones and their objective, cape spreading wide to fill the hallway. The drones paused, analyzing. The collective was learning. These weren't standard assault formations anymore. These were tactical units, equipped with enhanced shields and adaptive weapons specifically designed to counter what they'd learned from the previous cube's destruction. Species Zero. They intoned in unison. The Queen offers you a choice. Join the collective willingly, and your ship will be spared. Resist, and all will be assimilated. Spawn laughed, a sound like grinding metal. You really think I believe that? I've made deals with demons. I know when someone's lying. We do not lie. We state facts. You cannot prevail against 3 cubes. Voyager's crew will be assimilated. The only variable is whether you witnessed their transformation before your own. For a moment doubt flickered. He was exhausted. The symbiote was running on fumes. And they were right, 3 cubes was too much, even for Voyager's resourceful crew. Then he heard B'Elanna's voice over the comm, snarling Klingon battle cries as she reinforced engineering's defenses. Tom Paris making jokes to keep Harry Kim calm at ops. The doctor tending to liberated drones with the same care he'd give any patient. Janeway's steady command, keeping her crew focused and fighting. They weren't giving up. So neither would he. Here's a fact for you, Spawn said, chains beginning to glow with the last of his power. I've been dead before. Didn't stick. So let's see if your assimilation does. He charged. The corridor became a killing ground. Spawn moved through the 18 drones like a force of nature, chains whipping in patterns too fast for human eyes to track. But these weren't the same drones from the first cube. The collective had adapted. Their shields held longer. Their movements were coordinated to counter his attack vectors. When his chain struck, they deflected off personal force fields that pulsed with modified frequencies. A cutting beam sliced across his shoulder, burning through the symbiote's outer layer. Pain, real, physical pain, lanced through him. The symbiote screamed, trying to regenerate, but there wasn't enough energy left. Another beam caught his leg, and he staggered. The drones pressed their advantage, surrounding him in a tactical formation that allowed no escape routes. Assimilation tubules extended from multiple angles simultaneously. Torres! Spawn shouted into the comm. Engineering's about to get real crowded. Little help? On it! B'Elanna's voice was followed by the distinctive whine of force fields activating. Emergency bulkheads slammed down between Spawn and engineering, sealing off the drone's objective. They want in, they'll have to cut through 6 inches of tritanium and 3 overlapping shields. Good. Now how about helping me not die? Working on it. Stand by for. A drone's tubules punched into Spawn's back, injecting a concentrated burst of nanoprobes. These weren't standard assimilation protocols. The collective had modified them specifically for him, designed to overwhelm the symbiote's defenses through sheer volume. Millions of nanoprobes flooded his necrotic tissue, attempting to establish multiple neural connections simultaneously. The symbiote convulsed, fighting back, but it was weakening. Spawn felt his consciousness fragmenting as the Borg technology tried to rewrite his neural patterns. For a horrifying moment, he heard the collective's thoughts, billions of voices speaking as one, welcoming him, promising unity, perfection, belonging. No. He gritted teeth he no longer technically had. Not going back to slavery. The symbiote, sensing its host's desperation, made a choice. It began cannibalizing Spawn's own necroplasm, burning through his finite reserves to generate enough power for one desperate counterstrike. The green glow in his eyes blazed incandescent. The chains erupted outward with explosive force, impaling all 18 drones simultaneously. But it wasn't enough to stop them. Even impaled, the drones continued advancing, pushing themselves further onto the chains, reaching for him with mechanical determination. Then the ship's lights flickered. The inverse warp field pulsed. And suddenly, impossibly, the exotic particles flooding the corridor concentrated around Spawn like a vortex, drawn to him by the symbiote's desperate hunger. The symbiote drank. Power flooded back into Spawn's body, not necroplasm, but something new. The inverse particles were rewriting the symbiote's energy matrix in real time, teaching it to feed on this universe's exotic physics instead of hellborn power. It was adaptation at the cellular level, evolution compressed into seconds. The chains retracted, then extended again, this time wreathed in crackling inverse energy that bypassed the drone's shields completely. Where they struck, Borg implants simply ceased functioning, their technology unable to process physics that operated backwards from normal space-time. "Captain," 7 of 9's voice was filled with scientific wonder. "The symbiote is learning. It is integrating the exotic particles into its fundamental structure. Mr. Simmons is becoming native to this universe." Janeway watched the tactical display showing Spawn's energy signature transforming. "Is he stable?" "Unknown. But his power output is increasing exponentially." In the corridor, Spawn stood amid the deactivated drones, feeling the change coursing through him. The symbiote no longer struggled against this universe's laws. It was embracing them, rewriting itself to thrive here. The constant drain he'd felt since arriving had reversed. He was actually gaining power. "Breach point beta secured," he reported, his voice stronger than it had been in hours. "And I think your engineer just accidentally solved my power problem." Balana's voice crackled back. "I didn't do anything. The field's energy output hasn't changed. You're just pulling more efficiently from it somehow." "The symbiote adapted," Spawn explained, already moving toward breach point Gamma where sensors showed another boarding party. "It figured out how to eat your universe's exotic particles like they were necroplasm. I'm not just stable anymore, I'm charged." "That's wonderful and terrifying," Janeway said. "Can you handle the remaining boarding parties?" "Watch me." On the board cubes, the Queen received data feeds from the boarding parties and felt something she rarely experienced: concern. The drones were failing. Species Zero was not weakening as predicted. Instead, he was adapting, using their own attempted assimilation to fuel his transformation. Worse, the corrupted drones from the destroyed cube were showing unexpected resistance to reintegration. 70 of them had been recaptured when Voyager's shields dropped, beamed directly to the cubes for analysis. But instead of providing useful data, they were spreading the necroplasmic corruption through the cube's systems like a virus. "Sever connections to contaminated sectors," the Queen commanded. "Purge all drones exposed to Species Zero corruption. Prioritize vessel integrity." Entire sections of the 3 cubes went dark as the collective sacrificed infected portions to preserve the whole. Thousands of drones were jettisoned into space, still twitching as the symbiote's corruption fought the collective's control even in vacuum. On Voyager, Spawn teleported between breach points with increasing ease, the symbiote's newfound power making the jumps almost effortless. At breach point Gamma, he materialized behind a boarding party and simply released a wave of inverse energy. The drones collapsed like puppets with cut strings, their technology unable to function in the localized physics distortion. "This is too easy," he muttered, suspicion creeping in. "Why are they still sending drones? The Queen has to know by now that standard tactics won't work." 7 of 9's voice answered his unspoken question. "Mr. Simmons, I believe the boarding parties are not intended to assimilate you. They are gathering tactical data. Each drone the Queen sends is a sensor, collecting information on how you fight, how the symbiote operates, what your limitations are. She's studying me." "Yes. And when she has sufficient data, she will adapt." 7's voice carried the weight of experience. "That is what the Borg do. They learn. They evolve. They perfect their approach." "Captain," Tuvok interrupted. "The 3 cubes have altered formation. They are no longer attempting to board. They are surrounding us in a triangular pattern. On the view screen, the cubes moved with synchronized precision, positioning themselves at equidistant points around Voyager. Green energy began building between them, not weapons fire, but something else. A web of crackling power that connected all 3 vessels, with Voyager caught in the center. "What are they doing?" Chakotay asked. 7's face went pale. "They are creating a stasis field. A technique the collective uses to contain spatial anomalies and beings of exceptional power. It will freeze Voyager in space-time, preventing warp travel, weapons fire, even internal movement. And then? Then they board at their leisure, with perfect knowledge of our defenses and Species Zero's capabilities. They will have all the time they need to develop specific countermeasures. The energy web tightened. Voyager's systems began to lag, temporal distortions rippling through the ship. Paris's hands moved sluggishly across his console. Kim's voice came out stretched and distorted. Even Spawn, running toward the bridge, felt reality thickening around him like amber. Torres. Janeway's voice was slowing, time dilation affecting everyone. Can we disrupt the field? Not with weapons. B'Elanna's response came in long, drawn-out syllables. Would need massive energy spike to destabilize. Spawn reached the bridge, moving through air that felt like gelatin. His connection to the inverse warp field gave him slight resistance to the temporal effects, but even he was slowing. The symbiote raged against the constraint, burning energy to maintain mobility. Through the view screen, he could see the three cubes, their stasis web almost complete. In minutes, maybe seconds, Voyager would be frozen entirely. A fly in amber, preserved perfectly for the Borg to dissect. Captain! Spawn forced the words out against temporal resistance. I have an idea. Probably stupid. At this point, I'll take stupid. Janeway managed to turn her head toward him, the movement glacially slow. The symbiote, adapted to this universe, by eating your exotic particles. What if we give the Queen something she can't digest? What do you mean? Spawn looked at the inverse warp field surrounding the ship, millions of terajoules of exotic energy, particles that operated on backwards physics, inverse quantum states that defied normal universal laws. The symbiote had learned to feed on it. But the Borg? If I can absorb all the field's energy at once, and release it, as a pulse. He was already moving toward engineering, each step a battle against slowing time. The feedback might overload their stasis web. That would kill you, Seven said flatly, her Borg efficiency cutting through even temporal distortion. The energy required would burn through your reserves in seconds. The symbiote would consume itself trying to process that much power. Maybe. Or maybe it adapts again. Spawn reached engineering, where B'Elanna stood frozen mid-gesture over her console. Only one way to find out. He placed both hands on the inverse warp field generator, the symbiote spreading across the machinery like living circuitry. He could feel the field's vast power, enough energy to run a small star, compressed and controlled, flooding Voyager with impossible physics. Torres, when I start pulling, shut down the generator. All that power needs somewhere to go. I'm going to be the capacitor. Simmons, wait. Janeway's voice was barely audible now. Time almost stopped. There has to another way. No time for another way. Spawn smiled behind his mask, though no one could see it. Besides, I'm already dead. What's the worst that could happen? He opened himself to the field completely. The symbiote screamed in ecstasy as power flooded in, terajoules, petajoules, enough energy to crack planets. It poured into Spawn's body faster than the symbiote could process, filling him beyond capacity, pushing his necroplasmic structure to the breaking point and beyond. His body blazed with light, green shifting to white-hot as the exotic particles saturated every molecule. The chains around his torso melted and reformed continuously. The cape became a corona of pure energy. He was burning, transforming, becoming something more than Hellspawn, more than human, more than the Borg's classification of Species 0. He was becoming a living singularity of inverse physics. B'Elanna, fighting against temporal slowdown, managed to reach the shutdown control. The field generator died. All its power, every exotic particle it had been producing, now resided in one impossible man. The stasis web detected the sudden absence of exotic energy and compensated, tightening faster. Time on Voyager ground to near complete stop. Janeway's hand barely moved toward her armrest. Chakotay's eyes tracked Spawn with glacial slowness. And Spawn, filled with the power of a miniature universe running backwards, teleported. Not to another part of the ship. Not even to one of the Borg cubes. He teleported to the exact center of the stasis web, the nexus point where all three cubes' energy streams intersected, and released everything. The explosion was silent. The light was blinding. And the Borg Queen, for the first time in her existence, screamed. The inverse energy detonation rewrote physics in a sphere expanding at faster than light speeds. At the epicenter, Spawn existed in a state of quantum superposition, simultaneously matter and energy, alive and dead, present and absent. The exotic particles erupting from his body operated on principles that contradicted the fundamental laws governing the Borg's technology. The stasis web shattered. Not gradually, not with controlled failure, but catastrophically. The three cubes had been generating a unified field requiring perfect synchronization. When Spawn injected backwards-running physics into the nexus point, the synchronization became impossible. Each cube's systems tried to adapt to different, contradictory physical constants simultaneously. Chaos propagated through the collective's network at the speed of thought. On the first cube, shield generators cycled through every possible frequency in microseconds, creating a cascading overload. The shields collapsed, then reformed inverted, trapping internal energy instead of deflecting external threats. The cube began cooking itself from the inside. On the second cube, the propulsion matrix attempted to recalibrate to inverse physics and succeeded, which meant the transwarp coils started pulling the ship backwards through space-time. Drones stumbled as localized temporal distortions rippled through corridors, aging some sections centuries while others experienced time in reverse. On the third cube, the vinculum, the device coordinating all drones' neural connections, tried to process sensor data that made no logical sense. It interpreted inverse particles as both matter and antimatter simultaneously. The processing error cascaded through the hive mind, temporarily severing thousands of drones from the collective as the vinculum rebooted frantically. And in the center of it all, Spawn burned. The symbiote was consuming the exotic energy faster than a fusion reaction, but there was simply too much. His body couldn't contain it all. The excess bled off in waves of distortion that made space itself ripple. His consciousness fragmented across multiple simultaneous states. He was aware of being aboard Voyager, inside all three cubes, and floating in the void between stars, all at the same time. Through the quantum haze, he heard the Queen's voice, no longer synthesized and cold, but raw, almost organic in its fury. "What have you done? You are corrupting the collective. You are unmaking perfection." Spawn's response came from everywhere and nowhere, his voice distorted by exotic particle interference. Perfection is a lie, told by things too scared to grow. On Voyager, time suddenly snapped back to normal speed. Janeway gasped as temporal pressure released, nearly falling from her chair. The bridge crew reacted with similar disorientation, systems coming back online in a cascade of beeps and status reports. "Report!" Janeway shouted, gripping her armrest. "The stasis field is gone," Tuvok said, incredulity bleeding through his Vulcan composure. "The Borg cubes are experiencing catastrophic systems failures across all three vessels. I am reading multiple hull breaches, power fluctuations, and..." He paused, recalibrating his sensors. Temporal anomalies within the cubes themselves. "Where's Spawn?" Chakotay scanned tactical displays. 7 of 9's hands flew across her console, her ocular implant flaring. "He is everywhere. His energy signature has dispersed across a 10,000-kilometer radius. The exotic particle detonation has created a localized region of inverse physics. Captain, he essentially transformed himself into a spatial anomaly." Tom Paris stared at his helm readings. "Is he alive? Can something even be alive in that state?" "Unknown. By conventional definitions, no. By any definition we understand." 7 trailed off, her human eye wide. "I do not know what he is now." Harry Kim's console erupted with priority alerts. "Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from the lead Borg cube. It's the Queen. She wants to negotiate?" Janeway and Chakotay exchanged stunned glances. The Borg didn't negotiate. They assimilated or destroyed. The concept of compromise was antithetical to their nature. On screen, the view screen shimmered, replacing the damaged cubes with the Queen's visage. But she looked different now, her usually perfect composure cracked. One side of her face showed minor damage, circuitry sparking beneath synthetic skin. Her eyes, normally calculating and cold, held something almost like fear. "Captain Janeway." The Queen's voice was strained, lacking its usual absolute confidence. "Cease your attack. Order Species Zero to withdraw. I'm not the one attacking you, Your Majesty." Janeway kept her voice level, sensing advantage. "And I don't control Spawn. You brought this on yourselves when you tried to assimilate him. He is destroying my cubes, corrupting the collective with impossible data. Drones are severing from the hive mind because they cannot process what they are experiencing." The Queen's face flickered with what might have been pain. "This is not assimilation. This is not adaptation. This is chaos incarnate. Feels different when you're the one being forcibly changed, doesn't it?" 7 of 9's voice cut through the conversation, cold and precise. "When your perfection is violated. When your unity is threatened. When you lose control." The Queen's eyes focused on 7. "You speak from emotion, 7 of 9. The collective offered you perfection. You chose regression. The collective offered slavery and called it perfection. Mr. Simmons offered himself to save people you'd stolen. There is no comparison. In the space between the ships, the quantum anomaly that was Spawn began to coalesce. The exotic particles swirling in the void started gathering, compressing, forming something vaguely humanoid. The process was agonizing, consciousness reassembling from scattered quantum states, identity reforming from pure energy. The symbiote fought to reconstruct its host, burning through the absorbed power at terrifying rates. It had learned to feed on this universe's exotic particles, but generating a stable physical form from pure energy was beyond even its adaptive capabilities. Spawn needed an anchor. Something to pull him back from the dispersed state. On Voyager, the containment field in Cargo Bay 2 activated automatically. B'Elanna had programmed it to respond to Spawn's energy signature, a beacon calling him home. The quantum anomaly sensed a familiar pattern of inverse particles and inverse warp fields. Something in that pattern felt like safety, like stability, like home. The scattered consciousness that was Al Simmons reached toward it. "Captain!" Torres's voice crackled over the comm. "He's pulling himself back together. The containment field is acting like a quantum anchor. His energy signature is recohering in Cargo Bay 2. Doctor, get down there now. I don't know what condition he'll be in." "Already on my way, Captain." The Queen watched her tactical displays as the anomaly faded, its energy signature collapsing into a single point aboard Voyager. He survived. Species Zero survived quantum dispersal and voluntary reintegration. That should be impossible. "You keep using that word," Janeway said quietly. "Impossible. Maybe it's time you expanded your definition of possible. You do not understand what he represents. If the collective cannot assimilate Species Zero, if he can weaponize the very process of assimilation against us, then he is an existential threat to Borg survival. We cannot coexist with something that corrupts our fundamental nature. Then stop trying to assimilate him." Janeway's patience snapped. "He didn't ask to come to this universe. He didn't seek you out. You hunted him because you're obsessed with perfection and he represents something you can't control. The solution isn't to destroy him, it's to leave him alone." The Queen was silent for a long moment, processing. Her damaged face flickered as internal repair systems worked. The collective does not negotiate. We adapt or we eliminate. There is no third option. Then learn one. Janeway stood, approaching the view screen. "Your cubes are damaged. Your drones are in chaos. Your perfect unity is fractured. You can continue fighting and lose more resources. Or you can withdraw and consider that maybe, just maybe, there are things in this universe that aren't meant to be part of your collective." In Cargo Bay 2, The containment field blazed with light as Spawn's form solidified. The doctor rushed in with medical equipment, then stopped, tricorder hanging forgotten in his hand. Spawn knelt in the center of the field, cape spread on the deck, chains lying still around him. The symbiote had reconstructed his body, but the process had changed him. The armor was darker now, shot through with patterns that looked like circuit traces made of green fire. The cape had gained geometric complexity, fractal patterns that seemed to fold into higher dimensions. His eyes still burned green, but the light was steadier, more controlled. He looked up as the doctor approached. "Did it work? You just survived being dispersed across 10,000 kilometers as a quantum probability wave and you're asking if it worked?" The doctor's holographic matrix actually flickered with shock. "Mr. Simmons, by every medical standard I possess, you should be dead. Again. More dead. Permanently dead." "Yeah, well, dead doesn't stick with me." Spawn stood slowly, testing his reconstructed body. Everything worked, better than before, actually. The constant drain he'd felt was gone. The symbiote hummed with contained power, efficiently processing the exotic particles still flooding the containment field. "The cubes? Heavily damaged. The Queen is actually attempting to negotiate with Captain Janeway." "The bored Queen. Negotiating." Spawn laughed, the sound bitter and exhausted. "Guess there's a first time for everything." On the bridge, the Queen had gone silent, her processors running calculations. 3 cubes damaged. Thousands of drones lost or corrupted. The collective's resources were vast, but not infinite. And Species Zero had demonstrated capabilities that posed genuine threat to board expansion. Finally she spoke. "The collective will withdraw. But this is not surrender, Captain Janeway. This is tactical reassessment. We will observe Species Zero. Study him from distance. When we have developed appropriate countermeasures, we will return." "You do that," Janeway said. "And while you're studying him, maybe consider studying the concept of free will. Of individuality. Of choosing not to assimilate everything you encounter. You might be surprised what you learn." The Queen's image flickered. "You are naive, Captain. The collective is inevitable. We have assimilated thousands of species across the galaxy. One anomalous individual does not change the fundamental truth: resistance is futile. Tell that to Spawn. Tell that to 7 of 9. Tell that to every person who's escaped your hive mind and chosen to be themselves again." Janeway's voice was steel. "You're not inevitable. You're just stubborn. There's a difference." The transmission cut off. On the view screen, the 3 Borg cubes began to withdraw, their damaged hulls flickering with emergency repairs. They moved slowly, limping away from Voyager's position, leaving behind debris and scattered drones jettisoned during the chaos. "They're going to transwarp," Tuvok reported. "Tracking their trajectory, they are leaving this region entirely. Long-range sensors confirm they are not circling back." Chakotay let out a breath he'd been holding. "We actually did it. We survived 3 Borg cubes." "We didn't survive," Seven said quietly. "Mr. Simmons survived. We merely provided support." The bridge fell silent as they watched the cubes vanish into transwarp conduits, their green warp signatures fading from sensors. Then, slowly, the crew began to relax. Tom Paris slumped in his chair. Harry Kim actually laughed. Slightly hysterical but genuine. Even Tuvok's shoulders lowered fractionally. Janeway tapped her comm badge. "Janeway to Cargo Bay 2. Mr. Simmons, status report." "Still kicking, Captain? Or whatever it is dead guys do instead of kicking." Spawn's voice sounded exhausted but alive. "The Queen took the hint?" "For now. She's withdrawn to, how did she put it? Tactically reassess." "Good. Because I don't have another quantum dispersal in me. That was a one-time deal." "Understood. Get some rest. We'll debrief when you're recovered." Janeway closed the channel and looked at her crew. "All departments damage report. Let's see what condition we're in." As the crew began their assessments, 7 of 9 approached Janeway's chair. "Captain, the liberated drones in our cargo holds. Many of them regained partial consciousness during the battle. They are confused. Frightened. They remember being assimilated and they remember being changed by Mr. Simmons's corruption. They do not know what they are now." Janeway closed her eyes briefly, the weight of new responsibility settling on her shoulders. "They're people, 7. Lost, damaged people who need help. We'll give them that help, same as we gave you. It will not be easy. Some may never recover their full individuality. Others may reject it, preferring the security of the hive mind they have lost. I know. But we try anyway. Because that's what Starfleet does." Janeway stood, looking at the view screen where stars streamed past in the endless dark. "We don't leave people behind. We don't give up on them. Even when it's hard. Even when it seems impossible." 7 nodded slowly, her human eye bright. "Then I will help them. I know what they are experiencing. Perhaps my knowledge can ease their transition." "Thank you, 7. In Cargo Bay 2, Spawn sat against the containment field's interior wall, watching exotic particles swirl around him. The symbiote was quiet now, content, feeding slowly on the inverse energy. For the first time since arriving in this universe, he felt stable. Not alive, exactly, but not actively dying either. Just existing. It was almost peaceful. The doctor approached the field's edge. "Mr. Simmons, I've been analyzing your energy signature. The transformation you underwent has fundamentally altered how the symbiote processes power. You're no longer dependent on necroplasm from your original universe. You've essentially become native to our reality." "Meaning?" "Meaning you could leave this containment field and remain stable indefinitely. You've adapted completely to this universe's physical laws." Spawn absorbed that information. No more power limitations. No more counting down to inevitable return to hell. The deal Malbolgia had forced on him, the finite energy that kept him leashed, was broken. He was free. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd come to this universe by accident, nearly died multiple times, fought the Borg, scattered himself across space as a quantum anomaly, and in the process, accidentally achieved the one thing he'd wanted for years: independence. "Doc, am I still me? After being dispersed and rebuilt, is this still Al Simmons, or just something wearing his face?" The doctor considered the question seriously. "Philosophically, that's beyond my programming to answer. But medically? Your consciousness patterns are consistent with scans I took when you first arrived. Your memories are intact. Your personality appears unchanged. Whatever you became during the dispersal, you chose to come back as yourself. That suggests continuity of identity. So I'm still me. Just a me that works in this universe now." "Essentially, yes." Spawn stood, the symbiote rippling across his armor in patterns that looked almost content. "Then I guess I'm sticking around. At least until we figure out if I can get home. If I even want to go home." The containment field deactivated. Spawn stepped out into the cargo bay, fully stable, fully functional, fully adapted to a universe that ran on science instead of supernatural power. Behind him, the field remained active on standby, a beacon if he needed it, a reminder of how far he'd come. Ahead of him, somewhere in the Delta Quadrant, Voyager continued its 70,000 light-year journey home. And for the first time since resurrection, Al Simmons chose to walk forward instead of looking back. 3 days after the Borg encounter, Voyager limped through space at half-impulse while repair crews worked around the clock. The ship bore scars from the battle, scorched hull plating, compromised bulkheads, power conduits running at 60% efficiency. But she was intact. Alive. Moving forward. In the mess hall, Neelix had prepared what he optimistically called a victory feast, though the synthesized ingredients and limited replicator rations made it more of a victory-adequate meal. The crew gathered anyway, needing the communal release after days of tension. Spawn sat alone in the corner, a plate of untouched food before him. He couldn't eat, technically, but Neelix had insisted, and after fighting off 3 Borg cubes, arguing with an enthusiastic Talaxian felt like overkill. Tom Paris approached, carrying 2 cups of synthahol. Mind if I join you? Fair warning, if you say no, I'm sitting here anyway. Captain's orders to make sure you're integrating with the crew. She actually said that? She said check on our guest. I'm paraphrasing creatively. Paris sat, sliding 1 cup towards Spawn. You drink? Or is that also off the table with the whole being dead thing? I can drink. Doesn't do anything for me, but the symbiote likes the chemical complexity. Spawn picked up the cup, tilted his head back slightly, and the mask seemed to absorb the liquid without actually opening. Paris tried not to stare. So, you saved our asses pretty hard back there. The crew's been talking. Half of them think you're the coolest thing since Slipstream Drive. The other half are terrified you'll accidentally quantum disperse the ship if you sneeze wrong. Which half are you? Paris grinned. I'm in the secret 3rd group, people who are grateful and figure we'll deal with problems if they come up. We're adaptable that way. Comes from being stuck out here for 3 years with no backup. Spawn watched the crew mingling. Humans, Vulcans, half-Klingon, holograms, even the former Borg drone 7 of 9 attempting awkward conversation with Harry Kim. They were damaged, isolated, clinging to hope and each other. They reminded him of someone he used to know. Someone he used to be. Your captain, Spawn said quietly. She risked her ship for those Borg drones, knowing most of them probably couldn't be saved. Why? Paris's humor faded into something more serious. Because that's who Janeway is. She believes every life has value. Every person deserves a chance. Even when it's tactically insane, even when the smart move is to cut losses and run, she'll fight for people she's never met. He paused. It's gotten us into trouble more times than I can count. But it's also why we're still alive. Why we're still a crew instead of just survivors. Across the room, Janeway stood with Chakotay and Tuvok, discussing repair schedules and supply concerns. She looked exhausted. 3 years of command in hostile space was aging her faster than it should. But she smiled at something Chakotay said, genuine warmth breaking through the fatigue. She's a good leader, Spawn observed. The best I've served under. And I've served under some real pieces of work. Paris strained his synthahol. You thinking about sticking around? Thinking about it. Don't have many other options. The rift that brought me here closed. Even if I could open another one, going back means hell. Demons. Servitude. This universe might be 70,000 light years from where you want to be, but at least here I'm free. Freedom's good. We're fans of freedom on Voyager. Paris stood, clapping Spawn on the shoulder, a gesture of camaraderie that would have gotten most people killed, but Spawn let it pass. Fair warning though, Janeway's going to want you to earn your keep. We don't carry passengers. Everyone contributes. I can work with that. Later, in the captain's ready room, Janeway reviewed reports while Spawn stood before her desk. The office was small, personal, artifacts from her journey, a coffee cup that never seemed empty, pads stacked in organized chaos. The doctor says you're fully stable now. Janeway began without preamble. No dependence on the containment field, no risk of dimensional incompatibility. For all intents and purposes, you're a permanent resident of our universe. Looks that way. Which brings us to the question of what happens next. She set down her PADD, giving him full attention. You're not Starfleet. You're not bound by our regulations or chain of command. Technically, you're a refugee we're obligated to assist under Federation law. But we're also 70,000 light-years from Federation space, and out here those laws are more like guidelines. You want to know if I'm going to be a problem. I want to know what you intend to do. You have considerable power, Mr. Simmons. Power that could help this crew survive the journey home, or power that could endanger us if misused. I need to know where you stand. Spawn was quiet for a moment, considering. In his old life, the living one, he'd been a government assassin. Followed orders, completed missions, never questioned the chain of command. In his undead life, he'd rejected all authority, fought alone, trusted no one. Both extremes had brought pain. Maybe it was time to try something different. "I'll help," he said finally. "Not because you're giving orders, but because it's the right thing to do. You pulled me from that first Borg cube's debris field. You risked your ship to save drones you didn't owe anything to. You treated me like a person instead of a weapon or a threat. That earns loyalty in my book." Janeway's expression softened slightly. "I appreciate that. But I need to be clear. If you stay aboard Voyager, there will be expectations. You'll be expected to follow safety protocols, coordinate with security during threats, and generally not terrify the crew more than necessary. I can work within those boundaries. As long as you understand, if something threatens people under my protection, I'm not waiting for permission to act. The symbiote doesn't do bureaucracy." "Fair enough. I'd rather have you acting on instinct to protect this crew than hesitating while people die." She stood, extending her hand. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Simmons." "Officially." Spawn shook her hand. The gesture felt foreign after years of isolation, but also right. "Call me Spawn. Mr. Simmons was the guy who died. I'm what came after." "Spawn it is." Janeway released his hand and moved to the viewport, where stars streaked past. "We've got a long journey ahead. Hostile species, spatial anomalies, resource shortages, and now apparently the Borg's ongoing interest in you. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is." Spoken like someone who's been through hell. Literally, in my case. Janeway smiled, brief but genuine. "Then you'll fit right in." Dismissed. In the days that followed, Spawn found his place aboard Voyager. It wasn't seamless. His presence still unnerved portions of the crew, and his methods often clashed with Starfleet protocol. But slowly, grudgingly, integration happened. He worked with 7 of 9 to help the liberated Borg drones, his experience with force transformation giving him unique insight into their struggles. Some drones recovered, rediscovering individuality with painstaking effort. Others never fully disconnected from the phantom hive mind, their consciousness too damaged by assimilation to function independently. For those, Spawn offered what he could. Patience, understanding, and when necessary, mercy. B'Elanna Torres recruited him for engineering projects, fascinated by how the symbiote interfaced with technology. Together they developed portable exotic particle generators, miniaturized versions of the containment field that could provide power in emergencies or enhance shield efficiency during combat. Tuvok, initially skeptical, came to appreciate Spawn's tactical acumen. The Hellspawn's centuries of combat experience, both as a living assassin and undead warrior, provided prospective Starfleet training didn't cover. They ran security drills, planned defensive scenarios, and occasionally debated the ethics of preemptive strikes versus reactive defense. Even the Doctor found common ground, conducting extensive medical research on the symbiote's adaptive capabilities. The data could potentially revolutionize Federation medicine's understanding of regenerative biology and consciousness transference. But it was the small moments that mattered most. Harry Kim showing Spawn how to use the replicator, laughing when the Hellspawn requested something that doesn't taste like disappointment, and got Neelix's special blend instead. Tom Paris inviting Spawn to join the occasional holodeck adventure, where the Hellspawn could let loose without worrying about casualties. Chakotay discussing spirituality and the nature of the soul, 2 men from different realities finding unexpected common ground in questions neither could fully answer. And Janeway, checking in periodically, not as a captain monitoring a potential threat, but as a person ensuring another person was okay. 3 weeks after the Borg encounter, Voyager detected a distress call from a damaged freighter under attack by Hyrogen hunters. It was outside their planned course. Investigating would cost time and resources. The logical choice was to ignore it and maintain their heading toward the Alpha Quadrant. Janeway called a senior staff meeting. "Recommendations?" she asked, though everyone knew she'd already made her decision. The Hirogen are aggressive hunters, Tuvok said. Engaging them risks casualties and ship damage for unknown benefit. The freighters carrying refugees, Seven reported. Families. Children. 47 life signs total. The room went quiet. Spawn, attending his first senior staff meeting, spoke up. We go. We help them. Because that's what this crew does. Janeway looked at him, then at her officers. Mr. Spawn is correct. We're not going to leave 47 people to die when we have the capability to intervene. Mr. Paris, set course for the freighter. Tuvok, yellow alert. Prepare for possible combat. As the meeting dispersed, Spawn lingered. Captain, you were going to help them anyway. Why ask for recommendations if you'd already decided? Because good leaders listen to their crew, even when they disagree with the conclusion. And because sometimes, the crew needs to voice their concerns before they can commit to a difficult choice. She smiled slightly. Besides, it helps to have someone like you in the room. Someone who'll say what everyone's thinking but afraid to voice. That I'm becoming the crew's conscience? That's terrifying for everyone involved. Maybe. But you've earned it. Voyager altered course, engines pushing toward the distress signal. In his quarters, a small space near engineering that he'd claimed as his own, Spawn stood before a viewport, watching stars stream past. The symbiote rippled contentedly across his armor, fed and stable, no longer hungry or desperate. The chains rested against his torso, ready but peaceful. The cape hung still, geometric patterns shifting slowly in the low light. For the first time in years, maybe decades, Al Simmons felt something approaching contentment. Not happiness, exactly. The weight of what he'd done, what he'd become, would never fully lift. But purpose. Direction. A reason to keep existing that went beyond simple survival, or revenge. He'd gone to hell. Clawed his way back. Fought demons and government conspiracies and his own nature. And now, impossibly, he'd found himself 70,000 light-years from Earth aboard a starship crewed by people who saw him as an ally instead of a monster. Hey, symbiote, he said quietly to the living armor that had been both curse and salvation. Think we can do this? Actually help these people get home? The symbiote pulsed against his chest, not words, exactly, but meaning. Agreement. Determination. Partnership. Yeah, Spawn said. Me too. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, and somewhere beyond them, the Alpha Quadrant waited. It would take years to reach. There would be battles, losses, impossible choices, and moments where survival seemed unlikely. But Voyager had faced worse and endured. And now they had something the Borg, the Hirogen, the Kazon, and every other threat in the Delta Quadrant didn't anticipate. They had a Hellspawn who'd chosen the light. Not because it was easy. Not because it redeemed his past. But because some choices mattered more than others. And out here, in the endless dark between stars, those choices were everything. Voyager's engines hummed, carrying the ship toward the distress signal, toward another fight, toward home. And in the shadows of its corridors, a guardian watched and waited, ready to remind the universe that some things, once freed, refused to ever be chained again. The Delta Quadrant had witnessed many impossible things, spatial anomalies that defied physics, species that evolved beyond conventional biology, civilizations that rose and fell in the span of millennia. But perhaps nothing was quite as impossible as what happened when hell itself collided with the cold rationality of the Federation's ideals. Al Simmons, Spawn, the Hellspawn, Species Zero, had been forged in suffering, resurrected through demonic contract, and transformed into a weapon designed to serve darkness. He had spent years fighting against that destiny, clawing back scraps of autonomy from cosmic powers that viewed him as property. Freedom, for him, had always been measured in moments stolen between obligations to hell. Then a subspace rupture tore him from one impossible reality, and deposited him in another. A universe where science replaced magic, where exploration trumped conquest, where a stranded crew of explorers chose mercy over expedience time and again. Where a captain named Catherine Janeway looked at a creature of death and shadow and saw not a monster, but a person who deserved help. The Borg had hunted him, seeking to add his distinctiveness to their collective. They learned what countless demons and government black ops had learned before them: Simmons could not be controlled. The symbiote could not be tamed. And attempting to force assimilation on something that had already been violated, transformed, and resurrected only created a weapon that turned their greatest strength into catastrophic weakness. The Queen had retreated, her perfect collective fractured by contact with chaos incarnate. But Spawn knew she would remember. The Borg always remembered. Somewhere in the vast network of the High Mind, data about Species Zero was being analyzed, categorized, prepared for future encounters. They would adapt. They always adapted. But so would he. The symbiote had learned to feed on this universe's exotic energies. Where once Spawn operated on finite necroplasm reserves counting down to inevitable damnation, he now drew power from the same inverse particles and subspace phenomena that powered Voyager itself. The leash Malbolgia had placed on him, the 9:9:9:9 counter that made every use of power a step closer to hell, was broken. Not through victory or divine intervention, but through accidental adaptation to a universe that ran on different rules. He was free. Truly, genuinely free for the first time since resurrection. And with that freedom came choice. He could have left Voyager after stabilizing, disappeared into the Delta Quadrant to forge his own path. The crew would have understood. They owed him nothing, and he owed them only what gratitude his damaged soul could muster. But somewhere in the battle against the Borg, somewhere in Janeway's unwavering commitment to saving drones who had every reason to be left behind, somewhere in the small kindnesses of a crew that treated him like a person instead of a weapon, Simmons rediscovered something he thought had died with his human body: purpose beyond survival. Voyager would journey for years through hostile space. They would face species that viewed them as prey, phenomena that defied understanding, and choices that tested the limits of their principles. The Delta Quadrant was unforgiving, and the path home was measured not in months but in decades. But they would face it together. A crew of explorers, a former Borg drone reclaiming her humanity, a holographic doctor transcending his programming, and a dead man who learned that resurrection could mean more than just continuing to exist. It could mean choosing to live again. The Borg would return eventually. So would other threats, other impossible challenges, other moments where the crew's survival hung by threads of hope and determination. And when those moments came, Voyager would have something few vessels stranded in the Delta Quadrant possessed: a guardian born in hell, tempered by suffering, and committed to ensuring that the light of exploration, mercy, and hope would not be extinguished in the endless dark between stars. Simmons had fought gods, demons, and the corrupt institutions of his own world. He had been murdered, resurrected, and transformed into something beyond human comprehension. He had lost everything: his life, his wife, his humanity, and clawed back fragments of meaning from the ashes of his existence. Now, aboard the USS Voyager, he had found something unexpected, not redemption. His sins were too numerous for that simple absolution, but the chance to matter. To protect. To stand between innocence and the horrors waiting in the void. The journey home would be long. The battles would be brutal. The losses would be devastating. But some things, once freed from chains, refused to ever be enslaved again. And the Delta Quadrant was about to learn that the Borg weren't the only force that adapted, evolved, and became stronger through adversity. Because 70,000 light-years from Earth, in the darkest reaches of unexplored space, a dead man walked among the living and chose, every single day, to be more than the weapon hell had made him. That choice echoed across dimensions. And in the depths of the Borg collective, the Queen processed data about Species Zero and felt something her perfection had never anticipated: uncertainty about the future. Live long and prosper. Hit that subscribe button for more interesting stories. Thank you for watching.